The night was quiet in the Nevada desert. The stars shone brightly in the sky, and the wind carried a soft whisper across the sand. Inside a military radar station, a group of soldiers sat watching the screens. Captain Ryan Carter leaned forward, eyes locked on the blinking lights in front of him. Something strange was happening. "Are you seeing this?" Ryan asked the radar operator, a young man named Jason. Jason nodded. "Yes, sir. There are several objects approaching fast. They are coming from deep space." Ryan's heart pounded. "Can you identify them?" Jason shook his head. "No, sir. They are not showing as any known aircraft or satellite." Ryan grabbed the radio. "Command, we have unidentified objects moving towards Earth. They are fast, and they are not responding to any signals." Back in Washington, D.C., President Laura Mitchell sat in a dark room surrounded by top officials. A large screen displayed the radar images. The tension in the room was heavy. "How long until they reach us?" the president asked. "Minutes," replied General Thomas Gray. "And then we will see what they want." The objects entered Earth's atmosphere. Suddenly, power across major cities flickered. The White House went dark for a few seconds before emergency lights turned on. "We just lost power in several states," a technician reported. "Are we under attack?" someone asked. No one knew the answer. The radar signals vanished. The objects had disappeared. In New York, Ethan Brooks, a journalist, was typing on his laptop in his small apartment when the lights went out. He stood and looked out the window. The entire city had gone dark. People shouted in the streets. Car alarms blared. He grabbed his phone and tried to call his editor, but there was no signal. Something was wrong. Across the country, similar events were happening. Cities lost power. People reported strange whispers in the dark. The air felt colder. Detective Lisa Morgan was working late at the police station. She was reviewing a missing persons case when the lights flickered. A radio buzzed with static. She felt a chill down her spine. Then, the whisper came. "Lisa." She spun around, heart racing. The room was empty. A scream echoed from outside. Lisa grabbed her gun and ran into the street. A man was standing in the middle of the road, looking up. Lisa followed his gaze. Above them, something moved in the sky, blending with the darkness. At a secret military base, Colonel Daniel Hayes listened as reports poured in. Civilians were disappearing. Strange shadows moved in the streets. People heard voices in their heads. No one knew what was happening, but one thing was clear. Something had arrived, and it was hiding in the dark. Ethan Brooks walked through the dark streets of New York. The city had lost power, and the only light came from the moon above. People stood outside their homes, whispering about the blackout. Some tried to call their families, but their phones did not work. The air felt heavy, as if something unseen was watching. Ethan reached his office building. He was a journalist, and he wanted to write about what was happening. Inside, the newsroom was empty. The emergency lights flickered. He sat at his desk and turned on his laptop. The battery was low, but he started typing. Suddenly, he heard something outside. A soft sound, like footsteps, but slower. He turned to look, but the hallway was empty. A shadow moved in the corner of his eye. He stood up, heart pounding. "Hello," he called. No answer. Ethan took a deep breath and walked toward the exit. As he stepped outside, he saw a man standing near a streetlight. The man was staring at the ground, not moving. Ethan hesitated, then walked closer. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. The man did not respond. His face was pale, his eyes wide. Then, without warning, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Across the city, Detective Lisa Morgan was driving through the empty streets. She had heard reports of people vanishing. She arrived at an apartment building where a family had disappeared. She knocked on the door, but no one answered. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The living room was neat. There was food on the table, as if someone had been eating dinner. The chairs were pushed back, as if people had stood up suddenly. Lisa felt a chill. Something was wrong. She moved to the hallway. A soft whisper filled the air. She spun around, but no one was there. Then she saw something on the floor, a shadow, darker than the rest, shifting slightly. Her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she reached for her flashlight and turned it on. The shadow vanished. Lisa took a shaky breath and stepped back outside. The city was changing. Something unseen was moving through the streets. At a military base, Colonel Daniel Hayes listened to the reports. People were disappearing. Strange shadows moved in the darkness. The scientists were studying energy signals coming from the ground. They had no explanation yet. "We need answers," the colonel said. "Send a team to investigate." A group of soldiers, led by Captain Ryan Carter, prepared for the mission. They drove into the city, their headlights cutting through the dark. The streets were too quiet. It felt like the world was holding its breath. As they moved forward, the shadows around them seemed to shift. One of the soldiers, Private Lewis, stopped and pointed. "Sir, look at that." Ryan turned. A figure stood near a building, half hidden in the dark. The figure did not move, did not speak. Ryan raised his weapon. "Identify yourself," he ordered. The figure took a step forward. The streetlight above flickered, and for a moment, Ryan saw its face. It was not human. Its eyes were pure black, and its skin seemed to blend with the shadows. Then, in an instant, it disappeared. Lewis cursed under his breath. What was that? Ryan did not have an answer. "Stay alert," he said. "We are not alone." As they moved forward, the darkness seemed to close in around them. Something was coming, something that did not belong to this world, and it was watching them. The night was darker than before. The city was silent. People had locked their doors and windows. They were afraid. Something was moving in the shadows, something they did not understand. Ethan Brooks walked through the empty streets. He had his camera with him. He wanted to capture proof of what was happening. He stopped near an alley and looked around. The air was cold. He could hear his own breathing. Then he saw movement. A dark shape slid across the wall. It did not walk. It did not run. It moved like smoke, shifting from one place to another. Ethan's hands shook as he raised his camera. He snapped a picture, but when he looked at the screen, there was nothing there. He stepped back. A whisper echoed in his ear. It was soft, like a breeze. He turned, but no one was behind him. His heart pounded. He had to get out of there. Meanwhile, Detective Lisa Morgan sat in her car outside an old apartment building. Many people had disappeared from here. No signs of struggle, no footprints, just gone. She took a deep breath and got out. The air smelled strange, like burned metal. She walked inside. The floor creaked under her boots. The lights flickered, then went out completely. She turned on her flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but something felt wrong. The hallway seemed longer than before. Shadows danced along the walls, moving even though nothing was there. A sound came from one of the rooms, a soft scraping noise. She tightened her grip on her gun and pushed the door open. The room was empty except for a chair. On the floor, she saw deep marks, as if something had been dragged away. She swallowed hard. Then, the whisper came. "Lisa." She spun around, aiming her flashlight. The shadows shifted. She backed away, breathing fast. She needed to leave. Now. At the military base, Colonel Daniel Hayes listened to reports. More people had disappeared. Strange figures had been seen, but no one could describe them clearly. The scientists were studying energy signals, but nothing made sense. Captain Ryan Carter stood in front of the colonel. "Sir, we need to go back into the city. We need to understand what we are dealing with." The colonel nodded. "Take your team and find answers. Be careful." Ryan and his team drove into the city. The streets were empty. No cars, no people. It felt wrong. They moved carefully, their weapons ready. Private Lewis pointed ahead. "Sir, look." Ryan followed his gaze. A figure stood in the middle of the road. It was tall and thin, its body blending with the darkness. It had no face, no features, just blackness. Ryan raised his weapon. "Identify yourself." The figure did not move. "Last warning," Ryan shouted. Then the figure shifted. It did not step forward. It simply appeared closer, as if space had bent. The streetlights flickered, and suddenly, more figures appeared. Dozens of them, surrounding the soldiers. Lewis cursed. "Sir, what do we do?" Ryan took a deep breath. "We fight." He pulled the trigger, and the night exploded with light and sound. The battle had begun. Ryan Carter and his team fired their weapons. Bullets flew through the air, but the dark figures did not fall. Instead, they shifted, moving like smoke. The soldiers stepped back, their hearts pounding. Private Lewis shouted, "They're not going down, sir." Ryan clenched his jaw. "Keep shooting. We need to slow them down." The figures came closer. The streetlights flickered again, then went out completely. Darkness covered everything. The soldiers could barely see each other. Then the whispers started. Soft, eerie voices filled the air. "You cannot stop us." Lewis gasped. "Who said that?" No one answered. The whispers grew louder. Ryan felt a chill in his bones. He had fought many battles, but nothing like this. He had never faced an enemy he could not see clearly. "Fall back," he ordered. The team moved quickly, running toward their vehicle. The figures did not follow but stood watching. The soldiers jumped into the truck, and Ryan started the engine. The wheels screeched as they sped away. In the rearview mirror, he saw the figures vanish into the night. At the military base, Colonel Hayes waited. When Ryan and his team returned, he listened to their report. He did not speak for a moment. Then he turned to the scientists. "What are we dealing with?" he asked. Dr. Nathan Ross stepped forward. He had been studying the energy signals. "These entities are not like us. They do not have solid bodies. They exist in the dark, feeding on fear. Light might be our only weapon against them." Ryan frowned. "Bullets don't work. What kind of light can stop them?" Dr. Ross adjusted his glasses. "We need something stronger than flashlights. I can create a device that uses ultraviolet light, but it will take time." Colonel Hayes nodded. "Then do it. We need a way to fight back." Meanwhile, in New York, Ethan Brooks sat in his apartment, looking at his camera. He had taken many pictures, but none of them showed the figures he had seen. It was as if they did not exist. He sighed and rubbed his temples. He needed to find the truth. He decided to visit an old bookstore where he had once read about strange creatures from history. Maybe there was something similar to what was happening now. Detective Lisa Morgan also searched for answers. She had seen the shadows move, had heard the whispers. She had never been afraid before, but now she was. She needed to understand what was happening. She walked into the police station and found an old case file. Years ago, people had disappeared in the same way. No bodies were found, only empty homes and whispers in the night. She felt a chill as she read the reports. Something was coming, and it had been here before. Back at the military base, Dr. Ross worked day and night. His team built a prototype light weapon. It was small but powerful, designed to burn away the dark creatures. Ryan tested it. He aimed at a dark corner of the room and switched it on. The beam of light hit the shadows, and for a moment, a terrible scream filled the air. Then the darkness faded. "It works," Ryan said. Colonel Hayes gave the order. "We prepare for battle. The world must not fall into darkness." Ethan Brooks hurried through the dark streets of New York. He held his camera tightly. He had read about creatures like these before. Old stories from different cultures spoke of shadow beings, creatures that lived in the darkness. But this was not just a story, it was real. He reached the old bookstore. The door was open, Inside, the air smelled of dust and paper. Mr. Harris, the owner, stood behind the counter. He was an old man with sharp eyes. "You came for answers," Mr. Harris said. Ethan nodded. "I need to know what these things are. How do we stop them?" Mr. Harris pulled out a book. He flipped through the pages and pointed at a picture. It showed shadowy figures like the ones Ethan had seen. "They are ancient," Mr. Harris said. "They come from the spaces between worlds. They feed on fear. They hide in the dark. Light can hurt them, but only strong light." Ethan took a picture of the page. "Thank you," he said. "This might help." Meanwhile, Detective Lisa Morgan drove through the city. She had read the old case files. This had happened before. Years ago, people had disappeared in the same way. No bodies, just empty homes and whispers. She parked outside a house where a family had vanished. The front door was open. She stepped inside. The air was cold. Her flashlight flickered. The shadows moved. She gripped her gun. "I know you're here," she said. A whisper filled the room. "Leave now." Lisa took a step back. She turned on her flashlight. The beam hit a dark shape. It shrank away, hissing. Lisa's heart raced. Light worked. At the military base, Captain Ryan Carter and his team trained with the new light weapons. Dr. Nathan Ross had built stronger devices. They tested them in dark rooms. The beams burned the shadows away. Colonel Daniel Hayes watched. "Are we ready?" he asked. Ryan nodded. "Yes, sir. We can fight back." That night, the soldiers moved into the city. Ethan joined them. He carried his camera, ready to record everything. Lisa also joined. She knew the city and wanted to help. The streets were empty. The air was heavy. The lights flickered. Then the whispers started. "You cannot stop us." Figures appeared from the darkness. They moved like smoke, surrounding the team. Ryan raised his weapon. "Light them up." The soldiers turned on their lights. Beams of energy cut through the darkness. The creatures screamed and vanished, but more kept coming. Lisa shone her flashlight. One of the creatures lunged at her, but the light burned it away. Ethan took pictures. He needed to show the world what was happening. Then something changed. The shadows grew thicker. The streetlights went out completely. The creatures were getting stronger. Ryan yelled, "Fall back." The team ran toward their vehicles. The creatures chased them. One soldier fell. The shadows swallowed him. He screamed, then went silent. Ryan clenched his fists. They had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The creatures were learning. They were getting stronger. Back at the base, Colonel Hayes listened to the reports. He looked at Dr. Ross. "We need bigger weapons, stronger light." Dr. Ross nodded. "I have an idea, but it's risky." Hayes narrowed his eyes. "We don't have a choice." Ethan Brooks sat in the military base, looking through the pictures on his camera. He had captured something, but it was not clear. The creatures were like smoke, shifting and moving. He sighed. He needed better proof. The world needed to see what was happening. Ryan Carter and Lisa Morgan stood nearby, talking to Colonel Hayes. Dr. Nathan Ross had a plan, but it was dangerous. "We need stronger light," Dr. Ross said. "I can build a device, something big, something that can cover the entire city in light. But it will take time." Colonel Hayes nodded. "How much time?" "A few days," Ross replied. "But we don't have that long, do we?" Ryan shook his head. "No. The creatures are getting stronger. They are learning. They know how to avoid our weapons. If we don't act fast, they will take over the entire city." Ethan stood up. "Then we need to buy time. We need to keep fighting until the device is ready." Lisa agreed. "We have to find their source. If we can weaken them before the final battle, we have a chance." Colonel Hayes looked at the map of the city. "We have reports of stronger activity near the old subway tunnels. If they have a nest, it might be there." Ryan nodded. Then that's where we go. The team prepared their weapons. They had the new light devices, but they did not know if they would be enough. Ethan joined them. He knew it was dangerous, but he had to be there. He had to see the truth. They entered the tunnels. The air was thick and cold. The light from their flashlights barely pushed back the darkness. The deeper they went, the stronger the whispers became. "They know we are here," Lisa said softly. Ryan held his weapon tight. "Then we keep moving." Suddenly, the shadows moved. The creatures appeared, surrounding them. The team turned on their light weapons. Bright beams cut through the darkness. The creatures screamed and pulled back, but they did not disappear. One of them lunged at Ethan. He stumbled back, barely dodging. Lisa fired her weapon, and the creature vanished. "Stay close," Ryan shouted. They pushed forward. The tunnels twisted and turned, leading them deeper underground. Then they saw it. A massive dark pit, filled with swirling shadows. The source. Dr. Ross had been right. The creatures were coming from this place. "We need to destroy it," Lisa said. Ryan nodded. "Plant the charges. We'll blow it up." Ethan took pictures. The world had to see this. But then the shadows moved again. The creatures were angry. They attacked. The team fought hard. The light weapons worked, but the creatures were too many. One soldier was pulled into the darkness. Another screamed as a shadow wrapped around him. Ryan set the last charge. "Fall back." They ran. The creatures chased them. Ethan almost tripped, but Lisa grabbed him. They'd reached the exit just in time. Ryan hit the detonator. The ground shook. A bright explosion lit up the tunnels. The shadows screamed. The darkness faded. They had done it. Back at the base, Colonel Hayes listened to the report. "This will slow them down," he said. "But we need that device, Dr. Ross. We need it now." Dr. Ross nodded. "I will finish it. We are running out of time." The military base was silent. Everyone waited for Dr. Ross to finish the device. The team had destroyed the nest, but the creatures were still out there. They were weaker now, but they were not gone. Ryan Carter stood outside, looking at the dark sky. He knew the final battle was coming. Lisa Morgan walked up to him. "Thinking about what comes next?" she asked. Ryan nodded. "We hit them hard, but they are still here. We need to end this." Inside, Dr. Ross worked fast. His team built the device, a powerful light weapon designed to cover the entire city in bright energy. It was their best chance. Ethan Brooks checked his camera. He had captured everything. He was ready to show the world the truth. Colonel Hayes entered the room. "How much longer?" he asked. Dr. Ross wiped his forehead. "Almost done. We need another hour." Hayes nodded. "We don't have much time. The creatures will attack soon." The lights flickered. A whisper filled the air. The shadows outside moved. "They are coming," Lisa said. Ryan grabbed his weapon. "Then we fight." The alarm sounded. Soldiers rushed to their positions. The creatures came from all sides. Dark figures slid across the ground, climbing the walls, moving fast. The soldiers turned on their light weapons. Beams of bright energy burned through the darkness. The creatures screamed, but more kept coming. Ethan filmed everything. The world needed to see this. Dr. Ross and his team worked faster. The device had to be ready. A creature broke into the base. Lisa shot it with her weapon, but another one followed. Ryan tackled it to the ground. The shadow wrapped around his arm, burning like ice. He fought back, pushing it away. "We can't hold them forever," a soldier shouted. Dr. Ross shouted, "It's ready." Colonel Hayes gave the order. "Turn it on." Dr. Ross activated the device. A bright wave of energy spread across the base, moving out into the city. The creatures screamed as the light touched them. They burned, fading into nothing. The soldiers watched as the darkness disappeared. The whispers stopped. The air became still. Ethan lowered his camera. "Is it over?" Ryan breathed heavily. I think so. Lisa looked around. We did it. Colonel Hayes nodded. Good work, everyone. The team stood together, watching the sky. The stars were visible again. The city was safe. Ethan knew the world would finally learn the truth. He had the proof. He had the story. Dr. Ross looked at his device. Let's hope they never return. Ryan nodded. If they do, we'll be ready. The battle was over, but the world had changed forever.